Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Teach Climate Network meeting for November. It's awesome, as you said, to see so many people here. I'm Megan Van Lowe. I'm the education coordinator at Climate Generation and have been working with Climate Generation for about 7 years now, and most recently the past couple of years, specifically with our K-12 education program. And it looks like we have a lot of folks from around the country tonight. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our guest speakers and then get to introductions of everyone here as well, so we can get to know each other, kind of what we teach, what we do, talk a little bit about climate change education, and jump into the book, The Hour of the Bees, as well, within the hour tonight. Doesn't matter if you read it or not. If you did, that's great. If not, that's also great. We'll learn a lot from each other tonight. So yeah, if Natalie, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and tell us maybe a bit about the connection we have with each other?
Yeah, sure. So I am Natalie Stapert. I work at the Lowell School in Washington, D.C. with Dave. And we've been working with Climate Generation for 3 or 4 years. Dave's like 3 years. Sometimes it seems like a lifetime that we've been working together on humanities climate education for our 6th grade students. And so we've done a lot of exciting stuff together. We've done some study guides for different novels. We've done a climate summit in the summertime. And we just really value Climate Generation as a partner. We learn a lot from them. So I'm looking forward to this hour.
Thanks. And then Dave, if you want to give a little intro or what you teach, where you work, all that.
Sure. I'm Dave. I teach at the Lowell School with Natalie in DC. I teach 6th grade language arts, and we have a climate-focused curriculum. So all the historical fiction novels that we read are related to climate in some way, Hour of the Bees included. And I'm also the athletic director, so that's fun too.
Awesome. Well, Natalie was actually the person who recommended that Kristen and I read this book, so you can thank her for this awesome book. And then we were like, well, we should just have her and folks from Lowell join us, specifically this month for this book, since they have experience with it. So we'll get to that in a second. But just a few things about the Teach Climate Network. For those of you who haven't joined us before, welcome. Otherwise, I know there's some familiar faces here, but this network is for you all. Most of you are probably educators, but it's just kind of focused on a book or a film or article or something to relate to climate change. And then we can see how that can fit into classrooms or with your students. You don't have to feel any guilt about preparing if that's not working with your schedule, but we just love anyone who can join. And did somebody just leave? And then let's see, we meet every month, so we'll touch base about what December is going to look like, and we ask for a volunteer blogger each month. And I think Betsy, did you say you would like to do it this month? Okay.
Yeah, I can do it.
Awesome. So yeah, that would be great if you want to just write a blog about Hour of the Bees or anything related to that. All right, well, let's kind of go around and do introductions with the rest of the folks. And I would like you to say your name, where you are right now, and then what you teach or where you work. And then adding on to that, if you want to say one word that describes how the book at the moment for you in one word. So let's have Wendy kick it off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Abshire. I am the director of the AMS Education Program, and I'm currently sitting in Washington, D.C., where my staff is located. I've traded my hotel room, for those of you that are used to see me joining from a hotel room, to a house share. So I'm now in a lovely house share in the southeast quadrant of the city on Capitol Hill. And I'm connected to climate education through our program and offering teacher PD courses in climate science and also weather and ocean science. And one word the book made me feel. I would say, in strange ways that aren't quite realistic, it made me feel nostalgic.
Oh, nice. Keep getting that. Awesome. Who would like to go next? Thanks, Wendy.
I'll go next. Since I missed it last time because I'm in the different time zone. I'm Lori Rodney, and I'm in South Carolina. I teach English at the high school level, although I actually have readers that are probably at the Hour of the Bees level reading as well. So we'll talk about that. I'm working on developing a climate study unit for their research project, which I hope some of them will embrace. I give them a lot of choice in their research projects. And full disclosure, my son Jason works for Climate Gen, so that's how I got connected. But Jason and I talk all the time about what he's doing, and I actually Skyped him in to talk to our recycling club, our Earth Club last year, which was really good. And the book for me, even though I knew it was a middle school book, really was magical. I was surprised by it. I read it in a weekend and I really enjoyed it. So magical would be the word.
Nice. Thanks. Yeah, Jason is our Yamin program coordinator, so our youth program coordinator. He's just awesome. So I'm glad you're able to join us in this venue. Great.
I can go ahead and go next. Betsy Welkening. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and we're super excited because it's raining. We don't get rain
a lot, Betsy.
Yeah, I know, it's exciting. So I work with Arizona Project LEDA, the University of Arizona, and we do teacher education programs. And one of the big projects I'm working on is called Recharge the Rain, where we put in rainwater harvesting systems to build community resilience by growing shade.
Do you have a word to describe the book?
Oh, I was thinking of magical originally. I guess maybe home. It reminds me of home because it's the desert Southwest. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
I can go next. Can you hear me? Is that a yes? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Sarah Niemeyer. I am in Plainview, Minnesota. I work in Wabasha, Kellogg over on the river. So if you ever heard of Grumpy Old Men, that's where that movie was based off of. I teach junior high science, so 7th grade life science, 8th grade earth science, and then I have a junior senior earth climate class and then a physical geology class that I teach as well. And one word, I was thinking more heritage. I've been doing a lot of research in the past year about my family, and I got a cool booklet that I've been filling out and putting connections. So I guess a big thing for me was finding those connections and remembering your heritage.
Cool, thanks. Let's see, Natalie or Dave, do you have a word that you want to share that describes the book for you?
Curious?
Yeah, I was thinking about there's something sort of reverent about it, in the way that it addresses the past and the person's heritage.
Yeah, I like all of your words too. I would say kind of mysterious. I think what helps in a book like this is not knowing everything right away, and that makes you want to continue reading and understanding what's real and what's not, and all the mysteries. Great. Well, looks like we got a representation from a lot from the East Coast tonight, some Midwest and Arizona. So this is great. So yeah, I might just turn it over to Dave and Natalie if you wanted to share a bit about maybe how you've approached this book with your students, and then we can get to a discussion of the book too, and we can all chime in. But I'd just like love to hear about your experiences.
Dave, do you mind if I go first?
Go ahead.
All right. So I selected this book for our middle schoolers because it ticked a lot of boxes that we need to tick in order to choose something for kids that's worth kids' time. One thing was it was a female protagonist, which in a lot of the other climate novels that we read, we end up with a male protagonist, like Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, Long Walk to Water, The Giver. So, and I really appreciated her character. And the fact that she came from a Latinx heritage was also like just brilliant. And then I'm a huge fan of the genre of magical realism where there is a real explanation for everything that happens in the book, either coincidence or weather, or she's dreaming or she's imagining it. But then there's also a magical dimension to it, and the student can choose which interpretation resonates with them better. I just loved that feature of the text. And then the way that Carolina has separated herself from the land, and the way that her grandfather and the bees and the story of the tree help her reconnect with her roots and with the land. I thought that was a connection that we were really trying to promote for the kiddos in our program. So those are all reasons why I just really appreciate and value the book. And then Dave could tell you a lot of the things he does with it, and also sort of the nonfiction connections that he's made between the book and things that are going on in the news and other stuff like that.
Well, I'll add as another fiction connection that she's just a very relatable middle school kid. She's very nervous about being cool, missing out on her summer fun, the relationship with her family. All of those, I think, are really good variables that the kids buy into, because that feels authentic. And then, a lot of them have traveled to or know about warmer climates. I think that's the first place that we start, is talking about how, we had read about really hot Central African climates. And then the fact that those are also in the United States, like lots of them. I think kids from the city and the East may not recognize that that's a climate experience that's very nearby. So we talk a lot about that. We spend a lot of time talking about bees and pollination, and the impact that bees have on all kinds of different foods within their diet, and also in other elements of nature. We had a speaker come in who is, a climate friend at Laney last year, who came in to talk about her experience and some of the research that she's done on bees and the value of that. We played a game with them where some of them were flowers, some of them were bees, and they had different pollinating abilities based on the type of bee they were, and they went around the room, and some of them kids wore like flower hats and stuff. They were pretty into that. So that's something that we've done that I think was pretty fun. And then, as Natalie said earlier, there's a lot of opportunity for them to determine what's real and what's not real as it relates to the relationships in the book. But the nonfiction part is mostly about the bees in general and all of their sort of pollination and how pollination impacts climate, and also, of course, the desert setting. There's a scene in the very beginning when she gets out of the van and she has a sip of Gatorade and it like melts on the ground as she spills it. I feel like that kind of imagery is very powerful for the kids.
Nice. Welcome, Jenna.
Hello.
We have a veteran of the Teach Climate Network here.
Jenna's a star.
You all know Jenna, right?
Hello, friends.
Did you read the book?
I did in 3 days.
Well, I know, I read it at the car dealership. It was great.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks, Dave and Natalie. Thoughts on that from other folks, or just initial reactions to the book too, or ways you might use it?
One of the things that struck me was, and this isn't about climate, but the the idea of her name kept coming up. You know, the grandfather called her Carolina, and she was Carol, and I think going back to, you know, how middle school kids feel, but it evokes Sandra Cisneros for me, and we talk a lot about names and how important your name is, both your family name and who you're named after, and so that whole heritage that revolved around her name was interesting.
Definitely, I like that too.
I'd love to get the bees and flowers activity too. My ninth graders would love that.
Yeah, I can definitely send that to you. It was really fun.
Yeah.
I was able to connect to it on a few different aspects. You know, my background is I'm basically Irish Mexican, so I've got ranching families on both sides of the family. So I could relate to visiting the ranch in the summer because we used to go to my cousin's ranch on the Irish side of the family up in Nevada and hang out there. And then my dad's uncle had a ranch in Tucson. And I remember grandma talking about going out to the ranch because they would spend the summer at the ranch, and they would load up the horses and they'd head across town. And if there was water in the wash, they'd have to spend the night because they couldn't cross the wash. And now it's just a drive across town. And we went out to that ranch a lot as kids. And my dad and my brothers would go and get firewood, so they'd get mesquite to grill and cook off of. And my uncle was always like really careful. No, you can't take that tree. No, take over there. This one's fine, you know. So, you know, just getting that connection to the land early on. And I still remember after he passed away and they sold the ranch, they just created a subdivision in there and they just graded the whole thing. You know, it was pretty sad with that. But there's been a, you know, like Tucson has really spread out, and you know, I don't know how many square miles the Tucson area is, but it's done a lot of that, and it's a lot of different people try to preserve the desert and preserve that way of life. And you know, so there's still that mentality in Tucson, I think more so than in Phoenix area, is that, you know, we have our Hispanic roots in Tucson and we have this connection to the land that a lot of people have lost. So I could see all of that themes throughout the book, and it's something that we live every day here.
Mm-hmm. I love that about the book too, that I love that you can relate to it, but even if you didn't grow up in the desert, I think she painted a really great picture of that. And that's what I love about books and the way that we can relate to it with climate change, is like understanding there are different parts of the world or the country and people live differently, and it looks different. And it's all beautiful too. So I think it's great for students to be able to like imagine, you know, I think you can all imagine like, oh, I have to go to my grandparents' house for the summer, like what would that be like? So you can relate in that way, and then seeing like, oh, like theirs is on a ranch and that's different than what I've had. So
I have a question for Dave and Natalie. I'm curious if you could share, since you've been through this with your middle school students, how do they respond and relate to sort of the generational message that's told through the grandpa's stories? Do they get philosophical about it, and does it raise big questions for them, or not so much?
I think it took them a while to get used to the way that the book was written and the voice of the grandfather, but I think they figure out pretty early that he's not crazy and the messages that he's sharing are important. And they're sort of annoyed with Carolina that she's not picking up on it too. And I thought that was really valuable, because I'm sure that's happening in their families too, where they're getting these messages that feel unrelatable because they're so much, you know, they're so much younger and they have so much technology, and I don't know, whatever their experience in some ways is really different, but in other ways it's not. Particularly when they start going through the closet, she and her sister, before they're fighting, and they're really having a kid moment where they're like trying on the clothes and things of that nature. I think that's seen as really real. They find all these things that their grandmother had been, and all these interesting places she had been to, which are real as it within the story, things that like happened or didn't happen or whatever. I think that's something that they can really connect to, is trying to find artifacts about their own history.
Yeah, and I think one of the opportunities, like from a language arts perspective with the book, is you get a first impression of Serge that he's a little kind of crazy and maybe not trustworthy as a character in terms of is he telling the truth? Is he connected to reality? But they have this opportunity as they go through the book to revise that first impression and to really change their opinion of him. And I think that he wins them over, and that's really valuable just as a skill as a reader, to be able to continue to adjust your perspective on a character as you get more information, but also as a person. That the first impression you get, while important and valuable, you may need to change that over time as you get more information about them. So I think that's a really cool aspect of the book.
A follow-up to my question about what did they pick up on, and does it traumatize them or does it inspire discussion, is the whole central message of the chopping of the magical tree. Yeah. I'm just really curious how do they get into that, and do they talk about it from an environmental perspective?
I would say, as it relates to traumatizing, like we've really traumatized them with some very heavy literature. Howard the Bees we did in the spring, so they've already read about like genocide in Sudan and thousands of people dying from drought in Malawi. And sea level rise. So the book was, I think, very light, like a really light ending year. But yes, I think in general the notion that the tree would be cut down was a huge deal. And I think that they really connect with that as something that's sort of tangible, that they have theoretical control over as it relates to what they can do to improve the climate.
Can you hear us, the person who just joined? I'm not sure if she can. Ava or Eva? Well, we can continue on and see if she can.
Like she's working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, what are the other, you talk about extreme weather or like the climate impacts or things like that. What are the things that you draw out related to climate with this book too? Or maybe you others have ideas that you might use as well.
Well, the food chain thing was really important. I think that was really critical to show them all the different staples of their diet and which are made from pollinators. That was really critical. And I think a lot of them didn't realize that so many of those foods came from bees, which they think of as these like pesky things that sting them. And to see the benefits of that. And we made like a chain or a chart that had different types of bees and what they pollinate and how how that impacts all types of different foods, and then also how bees are dying left and right and are, as it relates to the climate, the flowers are coming up earlier, and as a result the pollination process happens earlier, what impact that has on their health and on the food chain, things like that. I think those were some of the big climate takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, the sixth graders really grabbed onto the change in timing, that as the climate warms and the flowers become ready to pollinate earlier, but the bees are still wanting to pollinate later according to the older cycle of colder weather. They were explaining that to me, and I was really impressed with what they had learned. As it related to